You've got those rusty iron stains or that rotten egg smell coming from your well water, or worse still, maybe you've got both. You know that an air over media iron and sulfur filter is the best route to go to get rid of that for your family, but there's several different kinds of them. There's several different sizes of them. How do you know what's the right kind and what's the right size for your family? Relax. I'm going to explain it all to you starting right now. Hi, I'm Gary the Water Guy, and I simplify water filtration to help you conquer crappy water for your family. This video is perfect for you if you're a do-it-yourself homeowner or a plumber and you're looking to get rid of those iron stains and get rid of that sulfur smell from your well water. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to select the best solution for your family. We've got our Hume FOBs, FOCs, and FOKs, air over media iron and sulfur filtration systems, and you may have also heard there's such a thing out there as an FON. All of them claim to remove iron and sulfur, and to complicate things, each of them is available in 3 different sizes. So which one do you choose? Before we go any further, you definitely need to know how these systems work. If you're not 100% sure, I've got a link in the description down below. So what do those letters mean anyway? The F and the O and the B and the C and all that kind of stuff. Well, the F and the O just basically tells you that it's a chemical-free air over media iron and sulfur filter. The B, the C, the K, and the N, that's the media that's inside the tank. Now the media, that's what makes all the difference. So when choosing which system is best for your family, it's very important to know the iron content, the sulfur content, and the manganese content of your water. But equally important is also knowing the pH of the water and the flow rate from your well pump. The flow rate from your well pump is very important because these systems need to backwash. And if you don't have enough flow rate, you're not going to be able to backwash that media, and different medias require different flow rates. Also, the amount of water that your family uses is definitely a factor. So what's the difference between these systems? Well, let's start with the FOB. So the B stands for berm. That's the media that's inside the tank. So berm media has been around for years, and it's great at removing up to 4 parts per million of iron. And if you have a little bit of sulfur, it'll get rid of that too. Now you do need to make sure that the pH of your water is 6.8 or higher. But you do need to be cautious that the sulfur in your water is less than 1 part per million. If it's higher than that, it's definitely going to shorten the lifespan of that berm media. The FOC uses Centaur or catalytic carbon, and that catalytic carbon is great at removing up to 2 parts per million of sulfur. So if you've got significant sulfur in your water, that's a great choice. Now, if you have iron in your water, as long as it's 1 part per million or less, the FOC will definitely work just fine. And with the FOC, your pH needs to be 6.8 or higher. Next up is the FOK, which uses Catalox media. So Catalox media is the newest of the medias we're talking about here, and it's really a fantastic product. In fact, it'll handle up to 9 parts per million of iron, 2 parts per million of sulfur, and 1 part per million of manganese. And it'll do that over a wide pH range of 6.0 up to 9.0. But keep in mind, if you want the FOK to also remove manganese from your water, the pH has to be 8.0 or higher. And the manganese content can't be higher than 10% of the iron content. And as a big bonus, the FOK will also remove sediment down to 3 microns. And if you're looking for more information about our FOCs, FOBs, and FOKs, you can go to our websites, either watereStore.com in the US or watereStore.ca in Canada. We offer free shipping and discount pricing. Hey, wait a second, I mentioned an FON. Whatever happened to that? Well, the N stands for Nexan media. Now, I don't like using Nexan media for removing iron because the media itself doesn't actually remove any iron. So you're totally counting on the air bubble inside the tank from oxidizing that iron out of the water, and then that Nexan media, which is great at removing sediment from your water, trapping that oxidized iron. So that's why I don't recommend them. Definitely you're better off with the FOB, FOC, or FOK. So in a nutshell, how these systems work, they create a big air bubble at the top in the tank. And what happens when you run your water is sprayed through that air bubble. It oxidizes the iron and the sulfur out of the water and the manganese if the pH is over 8.0, and then it traps it in the media within the tank. After 3 days of use, it backwashes to flush out all that stuff that's been filtering out for the last few days, sucks in air to recreate that air bubble, and puts it back into service. No chemicals used, super easy. Okay, great. Let's compare their specifications. So as you can see, the FOB, the FOC, and the FOK, you can see there's some difference there in pH. The FOB and the FOCs, you need a pH of 6.8 up to about 9, whereas you can see the FOK will take it down to 6.0. That's a big difference. Often from well water, you'll see the pH is a little bit on the low side, so that's a huge bonus for the FOK. Also, when it comes to sediment removal, again, you see a big difference. 60 microns for the FOB and the FOC, but down to 3 microns for the FOK. So again, huge bonus using the FOK there. Parts per million of removal. For iron, you can see the FOB and the the FOB is 4 parts per million, the FOC is 1 part per million, but the FOK, it's way up to 9 parts per million. And as for sulfur, you can see 1 part per million for the FOB, 2 parts per million for the FOC, which is actually pretty high, and again, the FOK is 2 parts per million. And then when it comes to manganese, you can see the FOB and the FOC don't remove any manganese at all. The FOK will remove 1 part per million of manganese, but again, the pH has to be 8.0 or higher. So with the information we've shared so far, it seems like the FOK is the best way to go. So why not just buy that one and be done with it? Well, it may not be, because one of the big problems with the FOK is the media is very heavy. So because of that, you need a higher flow rate to backwash it out properly. So do you know the flow rate from your well pump? Well, if you don't, no problem. I've got a great YouTube video that shows you how to calculate it. I'll put a link in the description down below. So when going through the selection process, this is the information you need. You need to know the iron content in parts per million, the sulfur content in parts per million, manganese. If you're getting black staining, that means you have manganese, and you would need to know that in parts per million. You'd need to know the pH of your water, the flow rate from your well pump, and of course the number of people in your household, because that's what helps determine how much water you use. Now, if you don't know the iron content, the pH, etc. of your water, you can always mail us a water sample and we'll test it for you. This is our mailing address. We don't charge anything for the water testing. Just be sure to include your contact information, including your email address. Great. Let's compare sizing, capacity, and flow rate for each of the different models we're talking about here. So let's start with the FOB. So you can see with a 1 cubic foot system, it requires that 5.3 gallons per minute flow rate. And if the number of people in your household is 1 to 4 and the iron content is less than 2 parts per million, that system will take care of that. Now, if you've got higher than 2 parts per million of iron, then that size system will only handle up to 1 to 2 people. So then if we go with the 1.5 cubic foot system, you can see now it requires a higher flow rate, 7.5 gallons per minute. That's why that flow rate is so important. And again, if your iron content is 2 parts per million or less, 4 to 6 people, it'll handle no problem. If your iron content is higher than 2 parts per million, 2 to 4 people is the best that it can do. And then you can see as we get to the 2 cubic foot and 3 cubic foot, again, the flow rate required goes up significantly, but it'll also service a lot more people. So next, let's talk about the FOC. So again, similar information here, 1 cubic foot, 5.3 gallons per minute. Less than 2 parts per million, which is pretty much the maximum an FOC could handle on a good day is 2 parts per million. And it shows here a column for over 2 parts per million. Again, I wouldn't advise that. But you can see, again, the flow rate goes up as the size goes up. So keep that in mind. And onto the FOK. So again, you can see that a 1 cubic foot requires 6.5 gallons per minute flow rate. Less than 2 parts per million of iron, hey, it'll handle up to 1 to 4 people. Over 2 parts per million, 1 to 2. And again, you can see as it goes up, especially when we get around to the 2 cubic foot FOK, you can see the gallon per minute flow rate is 12. Now we're getting very high flow rate is required to be able to give you that for 6 to 8 or 4 to 6 people. So when choosing the correct air over media iron and sulfur filter for your family, you base that selection process on the amount of iron you have and the amount of sulfur you have and the pH of your water. Then based on the number of people in your household, you choose the correct size, making sure that you've got enough flow rate from your well pump to properly backwash that system. And by the way, these systems cannot be used for irrigation or agricultural use. They can only be used for your home, cottage, or cabin. Click here for your next video on iron and sulfur water filtration. Any questions or comments, add them down below. I read them all. I'd love to answer yours.